The morning sun cast long shadows across Fort Braxton as Sarah Martinez stepped off the transport bus. At 22, she looked younger than most recruits, with her slight frame and quiet demeanor that made drill sergeants think she'd wash out within the first week. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation ponytail, and her brown eyes held a determination that few noticed beneath her unassuming exterior. Drill Sergeant Thompson stood at the front of the formation, his voice booming across the training grounds. "Listen up, maggots. For the next 12 weeks, you belong to me. Some of you think you're special. Some of you think you've got what it takes." His eyes scanned the group and landed on Sarah. "And some of you are just wasting my time." The other recruits chuckled nervously. Sarah remained silent, her expression unchanged. She had heard it all before during her childhood, moving from base to base with her military father. People always underestimated the quiet ones. "Martinez," Thompson barked. Front and center. Sarah stepped forward without hesitation. The drill sergeant circled her like a predator sizing up prey. "What do we have here? You look like a strong breeze could knock you over. What makes you think you can handle military training?" "I'm here to serve, drill sergeant," Sarah replied calmly. Thompson's laugh was harsh. "Serve? You look like you should be serving coffee, not serving your country. I've seen your type before. You'll be crying for mommy before the week is out." The weeks that followed were brutal for all the recruits, but Thompson seemed to take special pleasure in pushing Sarah harder than the rest. During physical training, he would make her carry extra weight. During obstacle courses, he would time her separately and announce her results to embarrass her. When she struggled with the rope climb, he nicknamed her Ghost because he said she was barely there. "Look at Ghost trying to disappear again," he would say when she fell behind during runs. "Maybe if we can't see you, the enemy won't either." The other recruits began using the nickname too, though not all of them meant it cruelly. Some, like her bunkmate Jennifer Walsh, saw how Sarah never complained, never cried, never gave up despite the constant harassment. "Why don't you say something?" Jennifer asked one night after lights out. "He's being unfair to you." Sarah stared at the ceiling in the darkness. "Complaining won't make me stronger," she whispered back. "Besides, he's teaching me something important, even if he doesn't know it." "What's that?" "How to become invisible when I need to be." During the 4th week of training, something shifted. The recruits were learning basic combat skills, and Sarah began to show aptitudes that surprised everyone except herself. Her small size, which Thompson constantly mocked, made her naturally good at finding cover and moving unseen. Her quiet nature meant she was an excellent listener, picking up on details others missed. In the simulation exercises, Sarah began to excel in ways that frustrated Thompson. When the recruits were divided into teams for war games, Sarah's team consistently won, not through brute force, but through clever tactics and stealth movements that she suggested. She could slip past sentries, gather intelligence, and report back without being detected. Thompson refused to acknowledge her improvements. "Lucky breaks," he would mutter. "Beginner's luck won't save you in real combat." But Colonel Harrison, who observed the training exercises, began to take notice. He had served in special operations for 20 years and recognized natural talent when he saw it. Sarah's ability to move unseen and think tactically reminded him of some of the best operators he had known. During week 8, the recruits faced their most challenging exercise yet, a night infiltration course. They had to navigate through a mock enemy base, gather specific intelligence, and return without being caught by the instructors playing enemy guards. Most recruits approached it like a standard military exercise, using teamwork and basic tactics. Sarah took a different approach. While her teammates created diversions and drew attention, she slipped away into the shadows. The course was designed to be nearly impossible to complete alone, but Sarah had been studying the layout for days, memorizing guard patterns, and identifying weaknesses in the perimeter. She moved like her namesake, a ghost in the darkness. Her small frame allowed her to squeeze through gaps that others couldn't navigate. Her quiet breathing and careful footwork made her nearly silent. She reached the objective building and retrieve the required intelligence without triggering a single alarm. When she emerged from the course with a completed mission, the instructors couldn't believe it. They checked and rechecked the sensors and cameras, but there was no evidence of how she had gotten in and out. For the first time since training began, Thompson was speechless. Colonel Harrison approached Sarah after the exercise. "Outstanding work, Martinez. That was some of the best fieldcraft I've seen from a recruit." Thompson's face darkened. "Sir, with respect, she probably just got lucky. These exercises don't mean anything in real combat situations." The colonel's eyes narrowed slightly. "Is that so, Sergeant? Well, we'll have to put that theory to the test." Word spread quickly through the base about Sarah's performance. Some instructors began referring to her as the Ghost with respect rather than mockery. Her fellow recruits looked at her with new eyes, realizing that the quiet young woman they had underestimated possessed skills that most of them could only dream of developing. Sarah remained humble about her achievement, but inside, she felt a growing confidence. She had always known she was different from other recruits, but now she was beginning to understand exactly how those differences could be turned into strengths. The nickname Ghost no longer felt like an insult. It felt like a warning to anyone who might underestimate her. Thompson, however, was far from convinced. If anything, Sarah's success had made him more determined to prove she was nothing special. He began planning ways to push her even harder, to find a breaking point that every recruit had. He was certain that beneath her calm exterior, she was just another weak link waiting to snap. As the weeks passed, the training grew more intense. The recruits learned advanced marksmanship, tactical communications, and complex mission planning. Sarah continued to excel, particularly in exercises that required stealth and problem-solving. Her scores in written tests were among the highest in the class, and her practical applications of military tactics showed an intuitive understanding that impressed even the most skeptical instructors. But Thompson's hostility toward her only grew stronger. He seemed to take her success as a personal challenge to his authority and judgment. During inspections, he would find fault with her equipment even when it was perfectly maintained. During drills, he would single her out for criticism even when she performed flawlessly. "Just because you can sneak around in the dark doesn't make you a soldier," he told her after one particularly successful training exercise. "Real combat isn't about hiding. It's about standing your ground and fighting." Sarah listened respectfully, but privately she disagreed. Her father had taught her that the best soldiers were the ones who completed their missions with the least possible casualties. Sometimes that meant fighting, but sometimes it meant being smart enough to avoid a fight altogether. The tension between Sarah and Thompson was noticed by everyone on the base. Other drill sergeants began to question Thompson's methods, particularly after Colonel Harrison expressed interest in Sarah's potential for advanced training programs. But Thompson was a decorated veteran with years of experience, and his superiors were reluctant to interfere with his training methods. As the recruits entered the final weeks of basic training, they knew that their biggest challenges were still ahead. The culminating exercise would test everything they had learned, and rumors suggested it would be unlike anything they had faced before. Sarah prepared for whatever was coming, knowing that Thompson would likely use it as his final attempt to prove she didn't belong in the military. She had no way of knowing that the exercise would involve the very skills that had earned her the nickname Ghost, or that it would take place in a facility that was supposed to be completely secure. Most importantly, she had no idea that her success would finally force Thompson to confront the possibility that he had been wrong about her from the very beginning. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine not just Sarah's future in the military, but also challenge everything Thompson believed about what made a good soldier. The quiet young woman he had tried so hard to break was about to show him exactly why some people called her Ghost. The briefing room was packed with nervous energy as Colonel Harrison addressed the final class of recruits. Charts and maps covered the walls, showing a detailed layout of what appeared to be a high-security government facility. Sarah studied every detail carefully, her mind already working through potential approaches and escape routes. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to your final exercise, Colonel Harrison announced. This is Operation Nightfall, and it will test every skill you've learned over the past 11 weeks. Your objective is simple in concept, but extremely difficult in execution. He pointed to the largest map, which showed a sprawling complex surrounded by multiple layers of security. This is the Blackwater Research Facility, located 30 miles north of here. It houses classified military research and is protected by state-of-the-art security systems. Your mission is to infiltrate the facility, retrieve a specific piece of intelligence from the main laboratory, and extract without being detected. Murmurs rippled through the room. Even the most confident recruits looked intimidated by the scope of the challenge. The facility looked impenetrable with guard towers, motion sensors, and multiple checkpoints marking every possible entry point. Thompson stood at the back of the room, his arms crossed, and a skeptical expression on his face. When several recruits asked questions about the security measures, he stepped forward. Don't waste the colonel's time with stupid questions. This exercise is designed to be impossible for recruits to complete. It's meant to show you how much you still have to learn. Colonel Harrison's eyes flicked to Thompson with mild irritation. Actually, Sergeant, the exercise is designed to test our recruits' ability to think creatively under pressure. While it will certainly be challenging, it is not impossible for the right person with the right approach. Sarah raised her hand. Sir, will we be working individually or in teams? Excellent question, Martinez. You'll be working individually. Each recruit will have a 4-hour window to attempt the infiltration. You'll be monitored throughout the exercise, but you'll be entirely on your own for planning and execution. Thompson's laugh was loud and harsh. Individual infiltration? Sir, with respect, these recruits aren't ready for that level of complexity. Most of them will probably set off the perimeter alarms before they even reach the fence. We'll see, Sergeant, the colonel replied calmly. The exercise begins tomorrow night. I suggest you all spend today studying the facility layout and developing your approach strategies. As the recruits filed out of the briefing room, Jennifer Walsh caught up with Sarah. This is insane, she whispered. Did you see all those security measures? There's no way any of us can get through that. Sarah was quiet for a moment, still visualizing the facility layout in her mind. Maybe that's the point, she said finally. Maybe they're testing whether we can see past the obvious obstacles and find a different way. That evening, while other recruits gathered in groups to discuss the seemingly impossible mission, Sarah sat alone in the corner of the barracks, sketching diagrams and making notes. She had memorized every detail of the facility layout and was now working through various scenarios in her mind. Jennifer approached her bunk. What are you thinking? Everyone's focused on the main security systems, Sarah said quietly. The guard towers, the motion sensors, the checkpoint procedures. But look at this. She pointed to a small section of her sketch. The facility was built in the 1980s and has been upgraded multiple times. There are going to be maintenance access points, utility tunnels, and service entrances that aren't marked on the main security plans. But how could you possibly know where those are? Sarah smiled slightly. My father was a military engineer for 15 years. He taught me that every building has vulnerabilities that the designers never intended. You just have to know how to look for them. The next day passed slowly as recruits took turns attempting the exercise. Sarah volunteered to go last, claiming she wanted to observe the facility's response patterns to the earlier attempts. In reality, she wanted time to refine her plan based on what she learned from watching the others fail. The first recruit, a confident young man named Jackson, tried a direct approach. He made it about 50 yards past the perimeter fence before motion sensors detected him and floodlights bathed the area in harsh white light. The exercise was terminated immediately. The second recruit, Maria Santos, attempted to scale the facility's eastern wall. She managed to avoid the ground-level sensors, but was caught by thermal imaging cameras mounted on the guard towers. Another failure. One by one, the recruits tried different approaches. Some attempted to bluff their way through checkpoints with fake credentials. Others tried to create diversions to draw security away from their entry points. A few attempted stealth approaches, but were detected by the sophisticated sensor network. Thompson watched each failure with growing satisfaction. "Just like I told you, Colonel," he said after the 8th recruit was caught trying to tunnel under the fence. "These kids aren't ready for real-world operations. They're still thinking like trainees instead of soldiers." Colonel Harrison remained silent, but Sarah noticed he kept checking his watch and glancing toward the equipment shed where she was making final preparations for her attempt. When her turn finally came, the sun had set completely, and the facility was illuminated only by security lights and the pale glow of a quarter moon. "Martinez, you're up," Colonel Harrison announced. "Remember, you have 4 hours to complete the mission. The intelligence you're looking for is located in Laboratory 7, which is in the facility's central building. You need to retrieve the file marked Project Nightingale and return to the extraction point without being detected." Sarah nodded and gathered her minimal equipment: basic lock picks, a small flashlight, black clothing, and a digital camera to document the target intelligence. Unlike the other recruits, she carried no weapons, no communication devices, and no high-tech gadgets. Everything she needed for this mission was already in her head. As she approached the facility perimeter, Sarah could see Thompson standing with a monitoring team, his arms crossed and a smug expression on his face. "This should be interesting," she heard him say to another instructor. "Ghost thinks she can sneak past professional security guards. Reality is about to hit her hard." But Sarah had already identified her entry point hours earlier. While studying the facility during the day, she had noticed something that the security planners had overlooked. The building's original heating and cooling system had been upgraded in the 1990s, but the old utility access points hadn't been completely sealed. One of them, hidden behind a maintenance shed on the facility's north side, showed signs of recent use by repair crews. She circled wide around the facility, staying well outside the sensor perimeter, until she reached the maintenance area. The utility access was exactly where she had expected to find it: a concrete tunnel that had once housed steam pipes, but was now used only for occasional electrical maintenance. The tunnel entrance was protected by a simple padlock that Sarah picked in less than 30 seconds. Her father had taught her lock-picking as a child, explaining that military engineers sometimes needed to access buildings quickly in emergency situations. She had never imagined the skill would be useful for something like this. The tunnel was narrow and dark, with just enough space for a small frame to crawl through comfortably. She moved slowly and carefully, using her flashlight sparingly to avoid creating any light that might be visible through drainage grates or ventilation shafts. The tunnel ran beneath the facility's main building, just as she had hoped. After 20 minutes of careful movement, Sarah found what she was looking for: a maintenance access panel that led directly into the building's basement mechanical room. The panel was secured with screws rather than locks, and she used a multi-tool to remove them quietly. She emerged into a room filled with humming machinery and the soft glow of status lights. According to the facility plans she had memorized, Laboratory 7 was 3 floors above her current position. The challenge now was reaching it without being detected by the internal security systems. Sarah had anticipated this problem. During her study of the building plans, she had noticed that the facility's elevator shaft contained a service ladder for maintenance access. The shaft would be monitored, but not as heavily as the main corridors and stairwells where security cameras were concentrated. She found the elevator shaft access door and picked the lock quickly. The shaft was dark and narrow, with cables and mechanical components creating a maze of potential obstacles. But Sarah's small size was an advantage here, allowing her to climb around the machinery without creating the noise that a larger person would have made. 20 minutes later, she reached the 3rd floor and carefully opened the shaft access door. The corridor beyond was dimly lit and empty, with Laboratory 7 visible at the far end. Security cameras were mounted at regular intervals, but Sarah had studied their positioning and knew their blind spots. She moved like a shadow, staying close to the walls and timing her movements to coincide with the camera's sweep patterns. Her breathing was controlled and silent, her footsteps virtually inaudible on the polished floor. Every skill she had developed during basic training was being put to the test. Laboratory 7's door was secured with an electronic keypad lock. Sarah had expected this and had come prepared with information gleaned from her careful observation of the facility during the day. Security guards were human, and humans developed predictable patterns. She had watched the guards' shifts and noticed that they checked certain laboratories at regular intervals, always using the same access codes. The code worked on the first try. Sarah slipped into the laboratory and quickly located the file cabinet marked with classification labels. Project Nightingale was exactly where the briefing had indicated it would be. She photographed the relevant documents quickly and efficiently, then replaced everything exactly as she had found it. The return journey was even more nerve-wracking than the infiltration. Security protocols typically tightened as the night shift progressed, and Sarah knew that any mistake now would result in capture just meters from success. But her careful planning paid off, and she reached the utility tunnel without incident. 40 minutes later, Sarah emerged from the tunnel entrance and made her way back to the extraction point where Colonel Harrison and the monitoring team were waiting. Thompson was pacing impatiently, checking his watch and muttering about wasted time. "Sir," Sarah reported quietly, approaching Colonel Harrison. "Mission complete. Project Nightingale intelligence retrieved and documented." The monitoring team stared at her in stunned silence. In 4 hours, she had accomplished what 11 other recruits had failed to do in their combined attempts. More importantly, she had done it without triggering a single alarm or being detected by any of the facility's security systems. Thompson's face went through a series of expressions: disbelief, confusion, and, finally, anger. "That's impossible," he said loudly. "Nobody could have gotten through that security. She must have missed something or triggered an alarm that hasn't been reported yet." Colonel Harrison was already reviewing the security footage and sensor logs on his tablet. His expression grew more impressed with each screen he examined. "Sergeant Thompson, I'm looking at comprehensive monitoring data from the entire exercise. Martinez didn't trigger a single detection system. As far as the facility's security is concerned, she was never there." The implications of Sarah's success were starting to sink in for everyone present. A recruit with 11 weeks of basic training had just penetrated security measures that were designed to stop trained special operations forces. The method she had used was so unconventional that even experienced security professionals had never anticipated it. Sarah stood quietly at attention, waiting for further orders. Inside, she felt a mix of satisfaction and relief, but she showed none of it on her face. She had known from the beginning that this exercise was as much about proving herself to Thompson as it was about completing the mission. Now the question was whether her success would finally earn his respect or make him even more determined to find fault with her performance. The silence in the monitoring station stretched uncomfortably as Colonel Harrison continued reviewing the security data. Other instructors gathered around his tablet, studying the footage and sensor logs with expressions of growing amazement. Sarah Martinez had not only completed an impossible mission, but had done so without leaving any trace of her presence. Thompson's jaw was clenched tight, his hands balled into fists at his sides. "There has to be an explanation," he insisted. "Maybe the security system malfunctioned. Maybe she found some kind of back door that wasn't in the briefing materials. This doesn't prove anything about her abilities as a soldier." Captain Rodriguez, who had been quietly observing the exercise, stepped forward. "Actually, Sergeant, I think it proves quite a lot. Martinez just demonstrated tactical thinking, operational planning, and execution skills that most Special Forces candidates don't develop until months of advanced training." "She got lucky," Thompson shot back. "One successful exercise doesn't make someone a soldier. Real combat is about more than sneaking around in the dark." Colonel Harrison looked up from his tablet. Martinez, walk us through your approach. I want to understand exactly how you accomplished this. Sarah straightened slightly. Sir, I began by analyzing the facility's construction history and identifying potential vulnerabilities that wouldn't be obvious from the current security plans. The utility tunnel system from the original building provided an entry point that bypassed most of the perimeter security. How did you know about those tunnels? Captain Rodriguez asked with genuine curiosity. My father taught me that every building has systems that get upgraded over time, but the old access points are rarely completely eliminated. I looked for signs of maintenance activity that would indicate which old access points were still functional. Colonel Harrison nodded approvingly. And once you were inside, I used the elevator shaft to move between floors. The security cameras in the corridors had predictable sweep patterns, and I timed my movements accordingly. The electronic lock on Laboratory 7 was secured with a code that I observed the security guards using during their regular checks. Thompson's face grew redder with each detail of Sarah's explanation. Observing security guards? When did you have time to do reconnaissance? The exercise was supposed to be a surprise. During the day, while other recruits were attempting the exercise, sir, I used the time to study the facility's operations and identify patterns in the security procedures. Captain Rodriguez exchanged a meaningful look with Colonel Harrison. Martinez, have you had any prior training in infiltration or intelligence gathering? No, sir. Just what I learned during basic training and some things my father taught me about problem solving and observation. The implications of Sarah's answer hung heavy in the air. She had developed and executed a complex infiltration plan using only basic military training and her own analytical abilities. It was the kind of natural aptitude that military intelligence recruiters spent years trying to find. Thompson could see the direction the conversation was heading, and his desperation to discredit Sarah's achievement grew more obvious. Sir, with respect, this exercise was artificial. Real enemies don't follow predictable patterns. Real combat situations don't give you hours to study your target. She succeeded because the conditions were artificially controlled. Colonel Harrison's patience with Thompson's objections was clearly wearing thin. Sergeant, every military operation begins with intelligence gathering and tactical planning. Martinez demonstrated exactly the kind of analytical thinking that we want our soldiers to develop. Rather than dismissing her success, perhaps you should consider what it tells us about her potential. But Thompson was past the point of rational discussion. For 12 weeks, he had been convinced that Sarah Martinez was weak, unsuitable for military service, and destined to fail when faced with real challenges. Her success in the infiltration exercise threatened everything he believed about what made a good soldier. She doesn't have what it takes for real combat, Thompson insisted. Sneaking around is fine for spies and intelligence operatives, but soldiers need to be able to fight. They need to be able to stand their ground under fire and lead other troops in a battle. Sarah had remained silent during most of the discussion, but Thompson's words struck a nerve. She had endured 12 weeks of constant criticism and deliberate undermining, always maintaining her composure and focusing on improvement. But now, after proving herself in the most challenging exercise of basic training, she was being told that her accomplishment didn't matter because it wasn't the right kind of success. Drill Sergeant Thompson, Sarah said quietly, her voice steady but carrying a new edge of confidence. With respect, I didn't sneak around tonight. I conducted a tactical infiltration mission using skills that any soldier might need in combat situations. Intelligence gathering, operational planning, and stealth movement are all standard military capabilities. Thompson wheeled around to face her, his face flushed with anger. Don't lecture me about military capabilities, recruit. I've been training soldiers for 15 years, and I know what real combat requires. It requires courage, strength, and the ability to fight when fighting is necessary. I agree completely, Sarah replied calmly. But It also requires the intelligence to avoid unnecessary fights and the skill to complete missions with minimal risk to personnel. Tonight, I retrieved critical intelligence without alerting the enemy or requiring backup support. In a real combat situation, that approach could save lives and prevent mission compromise. The monitoring station had gone completely quiet. Other instructors and recruits who had gathered to observe the exercise were watching the confrontation with fascination. It was unprecedented for a recruit to challenge a drill sergeant so directly, but Sarah's calm confidence and logical arguments made it impossible to dismiss her words. Colonel Harrison stepped between Sarah and Thompson before the situation could escalate further. "That's enough, both of you. Martinez, your performance tonight was outstanding, and your analysis of military tactics is sophisticated and accurate. You should be proud of what you accomplished." He turned to Thompson with a harder expression. "Sergeant, I want to see you in my office first thing tomorrow morning. We need to discuss your training methods and your assessment of recruit capabilities." Thompson's face went pale as the implications of the colonel's words sank in. A private meeting with a commanding officer after publicly questioning a recruit's exceptional performance was never a good sign for a drill sergeant's career prospects. As the group began to disperse, Captain Rodriguez approached Sarah. "Martinez, I'd like to speak with you privately about some advanced training opportunities that might interest you. Your performance tonight suggests you might be well suited for specialized roles that the military doesn't offer to many people." Sarah nodded respectfully. "I'd be honored to discuss it, sir." Jennifer Walsh, who had been watching the entire confrontation from the back of the group, caught up with Sarah as they walked back toward the barracks. "I can't believe you just stood up to Thompson like that. And I definitely can't believe you actually completed that mission. How did you stay so calm under all that pressure?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, processing everything that had happened. "I think I finally figured out what kind of soldier I want to be," she said eventually. "Thompson kept trying to make me into something I'm not, instead of helping me develop the strengths I actually have." "What do you mean?" "He wanted me to be physically intimidating and aggressive, like a traditional infantry soldier. But my strengths are in analysis, planning, and precision execution. Tonight, I proved that those skills can be just as valuable in military operations." 3 days later, Sarah Martinez graduated from basic training with the highest overall scores in her class. Colonel Harrison personally presented her with an award for exceptional tactical innovation, citing her infiltration exercise as an example of the creative thinking that the modern military needed from its personnel. Thompson was notably absent from the graduation ceremony. Word had spread through the base that he was being transferred to a desk job at a training facility in another state, though the official reason given was his request for a change of assignment. During the graduation reception, Captain Rodriguez introduced Sarah to Major Lisa Chun from the Military Intelligence Division. "Martinez, Major Chun runs a program that recruits exceptional candidates for advanced intelligence and special operations training. Based on your performance here, I think you might be exactly what they're looking for." Major Chun studied Sarah with the calculating gaze of someone accustomed to evaluating potential operatives. "I've read your file and reviewed the footage from your infiltration exercise. Your approach was remarkably sophisticated for someone with only basic training. Have you given any thought to what you want to do after graduation?" "I want to serve wherever I can be most effective, ma'am," Sarah replied honestly. "Good answer. I'd like to offer you a position in our Accelerated Development Program. It's designed for individuals who show exceptional aptitude for intelligence and special operations work. The training is intense, but it leads to assignments that most military personnel never have the opportunity to pursue." Sarah felt a surge of excitement that she carefully controlled. After 12 weeks of being told she didn't belong in the military, she was being offered a chance to join one of its most elite programs. "I would be honored to be considered, ma'am." As the reception continued around them, Sarah reflected on how dramatically her situation had changed. The drill sergeant who had nicknamed her Ghost as an insult had inadvertently identified her greatest strength: her ability to move unseen, think analytically, and accomplish seemingly impossible tasks were exactly the qualities that made exceptional intelligence operatives. Jennifer Walsh approached as Major Chin moved on to speak with other personnel. "So what's next for the famous ghost of Fort Braxton?" Sarah smiled at the nickname that no longer carried any sting. "Advanced training, then hopefully assignments where I can put these skills to good use. Turns out being invisible isn't such a bad thing after all. What about Thompson? Do you think he ever realized he was wrong about you?" Sarah looked out the window at the training grounds where she had spent 12 weeks proving herself. "I think he realized something, but probably not what we hoped. Some people can only see strength in one form, and they miss all the other kinds that matter just as much." 6 months later, Sarah Martinez had completed advanced intelligence training and was preparing for her first overseas assignment. The skills that Drill Sergeant Thompson had mocked as weakness had become the foundation of a military career that would take her places he could never have imagined. Her father, now retired from the military, attended her commissioning ceremony as a second lieutenant. As they walked together after the ceremony, he asked her what she had learned from the experience of proving herself at Fort Braxton. "I learned that the most important battles aren't always the ones where you fight," Sarah said thoughtfully. "Sometimes they're the ones where you prove that there's more than one way to be strong, more than one way to serve, and more than one way to succeed." The young woman who had been dismissed as ghost by a drill sergeant who couldn't see past his own limitations had become exactly what her country needed. A soldier who could think as well as fight, who could accomplish the impossible by seeing what others missed, and who had turned every attempt to break her spirit into fuel for her determination to succeed. Thompson never knew that the recruit he had tried so hard to destroy had gone on to become one of the most effective intelligence operatives of her generation. But somewhere in his new assignment, filing paperwork and training desk clerks, he probably still wondered how the quiet young woman he had